Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this event, which is going to offer you a special preview of a report out next week. The report's called Counting on the Recovery, the Role for Numeracy Skills in Levelling Up the UK, and as I think that title suggests, it draws attention to the importance of improving numeracy as we emerge from the pandemic. Well, all of you here today have got an interest and perhaps even a close involvement in numeracy, and a copy of the report will be dropping into your inboxes when it's published just after Easter. I'm Wendy Jones. I'm a founding trustee of National Numeracy. There are, in fact, three organisations involved in this report. First, Pro Bono Economics, who've actually done the work, researching and writing the report, and PBE is a charity itself, which uses economics to empower the social sector and increase well-being across the UK, across all sectors. And it carries out economic project work for individual charities and social enterprises. And this, in fact, is the second one they've done for us at National Numeracy. I remember sitting alongside them to launch their first report for us, and that was in 2014. And as well as working on specific projects, they conduct policy research that drives systemic change more broadly. National Numeracy, well, for anyone who doesn't know of us, we were established 9 years ago now to highlight the issue of poor numeracy across the age range. We've got a very clear vision. We want everyone in the UK to get on with numbers so they get on in life. And that means helping people build their confidence with numbers at work, home, school, everywhere, and thereby improving future prospects for themselves and the country. And third, last not least, KPMG, who have generously supported the production of this report. KPMG are, of course, one of the leaders in professional services, and they've been committed to the power of improving numeracy for many years, not least as the founding supporter of the now annual National Numeracy Day, which is in its fourth year now, and this year's is less than 2 months away, May the 19th, date for everybody's diaries. A few housekeeping points. The session is being recorded. However, only the panelists will be seen and heard within the recording, so nobody else needs to worry about that. Questions, there will be a Q&A part of the session in the second half, so please think about what you'd like to ask. And you can write the questions in the chat box, which is probably at the side of your screen, or it may be below, depending how you've got it configured. And we'll take as many as we can a little later after we've heard more about the report itself. And a request, because the report's not being published till next week, we'd be really grateful if you don't share any of the findings on social media or elsewhere until after then. Three panelists with me. I'd like to introduce them all. First, Jon Franklin, who's the Chief Economist at Pro Bono Economics and the main author of this report. He was in the Government Economics Service for 13 years, and before becoming Chief Economist at PBE, he was a consultant economist there, an economic associate, and before that, a volunteer, so quite a long history with PBE. Claire Warnes from KPMG is Head of Education, Skills and Productivity, and a member of KPMG's Infrastructure, Government and Healthcare Leadership team. She's got 25 years experience, I'll say it quickly, Claire, 25 years experience working with the public sector on improving public services. And she's built up a strong reputation in the leadership of large change programs across regulation, higher education, skills, health, criminal justice, security and defence. And that's quite a portfolio, I have to say. And Sam Sims is National Numeracy's relatively new Chief Executive. He joined us just under a year ago, and I don't think you can go on calling yourself new for much longer, Sam. Previously, he was Chief Operating Officer at the social work charity Frontline, Director of Development at Teach First, and an Assistant Director of Research at Yale University Office of Development. Well, we're going to go to Jon in a couple of minutes for an overview of the report. But before we do that, I think we should perhaps give it some context by getting Sam and Claire to look at the issue of numeracy more generally, what poor numeracy means and how we tackle it. So Sam, can I come to you first? Why is poor numeracy such a problem in the UK?
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks everybody for joining. When we talk about numeracy, we mean being able to understand and work with numbers and data in real world settings. And it's something that every single one of us needs, because it means having the confidence and the skills to use numbers to solve problems, to make sense of the world, to make informed decisions at home and at work, and to spark opportunities and access to opportunities in all aspects of life, and not least when it comes to accessing stable jobs and progressing within careers. However, the UK has a real problem with numbers, and it is holding us back. And as this new report will outline, as a nation, numeracy levels, and the report is looking specifically at adult numeracy skills, lag behind many other developed countries. And as a wide body of research attests, this contributes to really pervasive societal problems, pervasive unemployment, debt, even poor health. So the issue is far more pronounced, and the implications proven to be far more detrimental than I think most people would realise. Only around 1 in 5 adults in the UK are working at a functional level of numeracy. And as the data set that's used in the report shows, more than half the working age population has the expected numeracy less than or equal to that of a child leaving primary school, which is staggering. This holds millions of people back from fulfilling their potential and getting the most from life, and it comes at a huge cost to the economy and to individual incomes. But I think, to put it another way, as we start to turn our attention to the recovery, a more robust economy, higher volumes of even more resilient jobs, more evenly spread across regions and communities, improving basic numeracy skills, particularly of those with the lowest numeracy, could be absolutely key.
Right, so not a new problem, but somehow much more acute at the moment because of what we've all faced over the past year and what now lies ahead of us. Claire, why should KPMG be interested in this area?
Well, like every business in the UK, we run on numbers. If you think about it, every trade and profession in the UK requires some basic level of mathematical capability. And it's really important that all of us help to ensure that people have numeracy skills in work and life. I think from KPMG's perspective, I mean, we work with every sector of the economy and in every region, nation, locality of the UK in some form. And we think it's important to ensure that numeracy as part of kind of lifelong learning skills are part of our contribution to helping our own workforce and indeed the communities and businesses that we serve to thrive. We focus a lot on social mobility as our main focus in corporate responsibility because we believe that's where we can have the most influence and try to have the most impact. Of course, numeracy affects millions of people, or lower levels of numeracy affect millions of people across the UK. And if you think about how the economy needs to develop, if you think about our ambition to have all of our citizens being able to progress into employment and into productive employment, we want them to be able to have the skills to be able to do that. Basic skills such as numeracy are essential. And actually, as our economy develops and builds back, we want people to be able to move into roles which require levels 3, 4, and 5 qualifications. If people lack basic numeracy, they are shut out of those routes straight away. That's not right, and we've got to address it so that we have the widest possible pool of talent and the widest possible social mobility coming into our economy and into jobs. So for us, that's kind of critical. We are one of many businesses involved in working on numeracy, and it is part of our responsibility as business leaders to work with education providers, with government, with National Numeracy and other organisations to address this. We need people to be confident in maths to come and work in our organisation and work with our clients and communities, and so we need to play our part in ensuring that happens.
Okay, thank you both. I think that gives us some context as to why this is important. But what does the report actually say? What does it say that's new? So we're going over to Jon now for an overview, really, of what you found through your research.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Wendy. I'm just going to seamlessly share my screen so that you can all see the slides. So thanks. Pro Bono Economics got involved in this question of numeracy skills. I think very much to look at it from that very specific lens, of that economic lens, particularly in the light of the current crisis and the emergence of our society, UK society, as we move forwards from there. And I guess the first step to dealing with any kind of problem, any kind of issue, is to admit that you've got a problem in the first place. And the UK does have a problem when it comes to basic numeracy skills. This chart shows the proportion of the working age adults in various countries that have what's deemed a low level of numeracy skills. So this is using the OECD's definition of level 2 or below. Now, England and Northern Ireland, as the two countries from the UK that participated in this study, you can see they lag behind the OECD average, which is shown in orange on the chart. England has around 57% of working age adults with low numeracy skills, Northern Ireland 60%. And that is a long way behind those leading countries of Japan, Belgium, Netherlands, Finland, who have around 40% of their working age population with low levels of numeracy skills. There's a couple of things to note from this. First one is actually, the age of the data. The OECD data dates from 2011, 2012. And I think, frankly, the fact that the data is starting to get a little bit old is symptomatic of this problem, that we're not investing enough, we're not thinking enough about these basic skills, such as numeracy skills within the UK, because that really is the most kind of recent data, up-to-date data we've got on a comprehensive measure of levels of numeracy skills within the UK. But I think we can delve beneath this data that we have got available, and there's a couple of really interesting points that are worth flagging up. The first one is that despite the fact that overall England and Northern Ireland are not performing very well in terms of numeracy skills, those levels of numeracy skills actually vary quite significantly across different regions of the UK. So, for example, in the northeast, which generally comes up as one of the lower performing regions in terms of the levels of numeracy skills, around 65% of working age adults have low numeracy skills. And that compares to the southeast, which is generally one of the better performing regions, which has around 51% of working age adults with low numeracy skills. So there are big differences across the country. And I guess it's worth putting in the context that 51% down the southeast is a lot better than the national average of 57% across England, but that's still well behind those leading countries in the OECD. So even our best performing regions are doing worse when it comes to numeracy skills than those best performing countries across comparable, relatively rich nations. The second interesting thing to be drawn out of that data when we dig into it in a bit more detail is the way that the levels of numeracy skills vary across the workers in different sectors. So on this chart, we've got the different sectors of the economy going down on the left-hand side, using the same kind of broad-based ONS sectoral definitions. And then we've got the proportion of the workforce falling into different levels of numeracy skills split out on that. So the dark blue line shows the proportion of the workforce in each sector with low numeracy skills. The yellow line, the yellow proportion is the proportion with basic numeracy skills, and the pale blue line is the proportion with advanced numeracy skills. And you see there are some big differences here. So the information and communication sector, which tends to be one of the strongest performing in terms of the numeracy skills of its workers, has around just 27% of that workforce with low numeracy skills. And that compares to the accommodation and food sector, where it's more like 70%. 70% of the entire workforce has low numeracy skills in that sector. Now, in a way, I guess these differences across sectors make sense. You'd expect there to be some differences. Different sectors require different skills, different types of people to work in them, and different blends of skills in order to work in them. But it does have a couple of really important implications for the individuals themselves. The first one is that numeracy skills impact on household incomes. So those with lower numeracy skills tend to have lower incomes. And this is something that you could look at in terms of casual observation. Those sectors that tend to have higher average wages also tend to have higher levels of numeracy skills. But actually, it's been quite rigorously researched at the individual level as well. There are a number of studies that have looked into this that try to control for all kinds of factors, such as other basic skills, literacy skills, digital skills, try to control for levels of education, years of experience, age of the employees, parental backgrounds, a whole host of different factors. Even when you control for all of that, numeracy skills are systematically linked with lower levels of income. And if you apply that literature to the UK context, it works out that those with low numeracy skills have around 6.5% lower pay than they would if they had a basic level of numeracy skills. So for the average person with low numeracy skills in the UK, that's around £1,600 less per year, that wage differential that's driven by the levels of low numeracy. which when you think we're talking about 16 million workers in the UK with low numeracy skills, you start to get a sense of just the pure scale of this issue and the potential impact it's having. Now, you have to be a little bit cautious about just saying, well, we've got 16 million people, each with a potential differential in their wage of £1,600 and multiplying it up. Because actually, if by some magic overnight we could help all 16 million people move up to basic numeracy skills, that would impact on the scale of wage improvement that they might actually experience in reality. But we also know in reality, you can't get 60 million people to improve their numeracy skills overnight. Unfortunately, I think there will be a role for national numeracy for many years to come. It will take time to improve the numeracy skills of that many people. And actually, if you look at the history of the UK, there's been some good studies, such as one by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, that have shown that those premiums for skills that you see in terms of wages are actually remarkably resilient to increases in the supply of those skills. So even if we can make some quite substantial increases in the level of numeracy skills, we wouldn't necessarily expect all of that wage premium to disappear. So as a very rough first approximation, actually looking at that £1,600 across all of those 16 million people, that means there's a differential of around 25 billion in household incomes that could be driven by those low numeracy skills, based on the evidence that's out there on that relationship between numeracy and wage levels. So first of all, we've got an issue in terms of numeracy impacting on household incomes. And just as a sense of scale, those kinds of figures give you a feel that actually this is an issue that it makes a material difference to the economy and material difference to people's lives. But on top of that, the issues for people with low numeracy skills have been worsened during the crisis. Because the impacts of the crisis, the latest crisis, haven't been evenly felt across the UK and across different sectors. Actually, there's reasons to think that those with low numeracy skills have come off worse throughout this crisis. So on this chart, we're showing the percentage change in the number of jobs between September 2019 and September 2020 as a first indicator of the impact of the crisis on the number of jobs. And on the left-hand side, we've got the proportionate impact for those sectors that have a low proportion of workers with basic or advanced numeracy skills. So those are the sectors that tend to have employees, workers with low levels of numeracy skills. On the right-hand side, we've got those sectors that tend to have the highest proportion of people with good numeracy skills. You can see, proportionately, you're seeing a far bigger reduction in the number of jobs for those sectors that traditionally employ more people with low numeracy skills. And that means that of the 900,000 jobs that were lost over that period within the UK economy between September 2019 and September 2020, we think that around 59% of them, or 560,000 of those individuals, are likely to have had low numeracy skills. And this prompts some quite interesting and important questions about what happens next. How do we help those people that have lost their jobs, that have low numeracy skills, to get back into work? What needs to change to support them? And whilst it's very difficult to give a kind of definitive picture of how the structure of the UK economy is going to change following the crisis, because that's an unknown factor. There's a lot going on at the moment. It's very early to tell. Looking back at some of the historic recent trends in terms of the job growth across different sectors paints quite an interesting picture. So on this chart, we're showing the growth in the number of jobs since March 2010, where it was kind of starting them all on an index starting at 100, for the breakdown of three broad groups of sectors that we talked about already. So those with high numeracy skills, those sectors that typically employ people with low numeracy skills, and those with intermediate workers that typically have intermediate numeracy skills. And you can see from this chart that blue line at the top, the light blue line, is those sectors that have a high proportion of workers with basic or advanced numeracy skills. So they tend to employ people with good numeracy skills. We've seen far more growth in the number of jobs, so around 24% growth in the number of jobs in those sectors since March 2010 up until the beginning of the crisis. Now, the next line down is the dark blue line, which is for those sectors which typically employ a lower proportion of workers with basic or advanced numeracy skills. So those are the sectors that typically employ more people with lower numeracy skills. And I guess what's surprising is that there has actually been a fair amount of growth in those sectors over that period. So around 15% growth in the number of jobs in the 10 years up to just before the crisis. But what's interesting about that growth is that is largely driven by two sectors, the accommodation and food sector and the administrative and support services sector. And those are the two sectors that have been most dramatically hit by the crisis in terms of the number of jobs. Those are the sectors that have been hugely impacted by all of the constraints, the restrictions that have been put down on the UK population over that period, and we have seen, the most significant reductions in number of jobs for those sectors. So whereas actually for those high numeracy sectors, there's no reason to think that as the economy recovers, we'd expect that growth in jobs to continue. That seems like a strong positive trend that we would expect to carry on. For that dark blue line, first of all, the growth hasn't been as strong anyway. But secondly, those are the sectors that have been most dramatically impacted by the crisis. And whilst we'd expect there to be a significant bounce back as the economy recovers, it's unknown and uncertain at the moment as to what extent we would expect those low numeracy sectors to bounce back as quickly or as significantly, or whether there could be permanent shocks in terms of the number of jobs available in those groups. And when you look at the picture like that, it suggests that in terms of where do we expect there to be growth in jobs going forwards as the economy recovers, well, we'd be a lot more confident in terms of having additional growth in terms of number of jobs in those higher numeracy sectors, or those sectors that tend to employ people with better numeracy skills, than we would in some of those sectors that typically employ people with lower numeracy skills. So what does this all mean? The short picture is numeracy skills matter for individuals. They are linked to lower pay. They are linked to, or lower numeracy skills are linked to lower pay. Lower numeracy skills are linked to a greater likelihood of being out of work. And also numeracy skills are linked to financial outcomes and health outcomes as well. So as such, it's not a huge leap to think about numeracy skills as a potentially policy lever, as a policy tool for supporting better outcomes in the UK economy. And that can be a tool that can both support those that are currently out of work to help them find jobs as the economy recovers in those sectors that are likely to be more sustainable. They're likely to be higher growth. They're likely to be higher skilled. They're likely to be better paid. On top of that, and we're going to touch on this in a bit more detail later on, it's also a tool that we use to target support to those areas of the UK that need it most, and those individuals that need it most. We know that people with low numeracy skills are typically far lower paid than other people within the economy. But also, if you put it in the light of the UK's industrial strategy, which talks about industries of the future, these are the sectors that the government, the UK wants to support and see grow more in the future. Those industries typically fall in those sectors that need and use far more people with high numeracy skills. So by supporting the development of numeracy skills, it's likely that you're able to support those sectors which strategically the UK wants to see further growth in the future. So put simply, as a society, it kind of makes sense to be worrying about numeracy skills. It's linked to so many important outcomes for individuals, but also for the kind of UK economy more generally. And I think driving up numeracy skills over time is likely to require a concerted effort by a number of different players. Be that the government, be that businesses, be that the social sector and organisations like National Numeracy, or be it individuals themselves taking responsibility to try and drive up their skills themselves. All of those routes are going to matter. All of those players are going to be important if we're going to tackle this crisis and improve the levels of numeracy in the UK economy.
Right. Jon, thank you very much. Can I just ask you one thing, which may be occurring to some people, which is how much is numeracy, poor numeracy, a proxy for low skills in general, whether that's low educational qualifications or just general sort of confidence about doing things? Or is there something specific about numeracy?
I think other people will have thoughts on this as well. So I can talk to the evidence that's out there. The evidence out there suggests that if you control for lots of other factors, it's still numeracy skills that are linked to lower wages. So the studies that are out there look at the impacts of other types of basic skills, so literacy skills and digital literacy skills as well. And even once you take into account those, even once you take into account levels of education, levels of experience in the workforce, it's still numeracy skills in particular that also seem to contribute towards lower wages in particular. Okay, I think Sam might be able to talk more about that, the impact of confidence around numbers and the confidence and how they relate to those skills as well.
Yeah, actually there's a question coming in already. We'll take the questions a bit later, but specifically about confidence. So we will be coming to that point. But thank you very much. I mean, that's given us great context. In a way, there's nothing new about this, but that doesn't make it any the less shocking. And the current context that we're in, I think, just makes everything feel so much more acute. So can I come to you, Claire and Sam, for immediate reactions? I mean, perhaps Sam first, your thoughts on what we've just seen and heard.
Well, what I think should really make us sit up and take notice is the scale of those of the implications of low numeracy, and both the opportunity and the imperative, I think, really that it creates. You know, as much as £1,600 average wage differential for as many potentially as 16 million people. I mean, we already know that there's a strong link between qualifications and earnings, and it stands to reason implicitly that there's a strong link between basic skills and both stable careers and income. And this report really does support that hypothesis. And of course, underneath all of those figures, we know, of course, that this cost of poor numeracy hits the least advantaged in low-income communities the most. And of course, these are the jobs that are hardest hit and the people that are hardest hit by the COVID crisis.
Right, thanks, Sam. And Claire, your reaction as you... Yeah, I mean, not surprised by the findings, but I guess it's constantly sobering to think that how advanced and funded our education system is, and yet how far behind our competitor economies we are when it comes to numeracy skills, which we know is key, and it is likely to continue to exclude people from the economy unless we fully address it. One thing that I thought was interesting was the map of difference, so where numeracy skills are different across England. The productivity gaps are similar. They may not be perfectly overlapping, but there's a lot of variability in productivity gaps across the UK. And we know from our work working alongside business in the community as well as national numeracy that the lack of essential skills is absolutely critical, and numeracy is a key part of that. Just a couple of other points, I guess. I mean, not at all surprised to see that it's worsened during the pandemic. And actually, it feels like we need a bit of a reset around what we mean by skills and qualifications, and particularly helping people to move from those displaced economies which have managed with people who have low numeracy levels, and helping those people to get basic numeracy so that they can move to those parts of the economy that are still in need of significant numbers of people. Health and social care is a great example of that. That appears sort of in the middle of the table on Jon's chart, but actually numeracy skills are essential to people progressing in areas like health and social care. If we're going to move people from hospitality and accommodation and those types of industries, we need to support them to be able to move safely into roles in booming sectors of the economy like that. So, I mean, for me, it's sobering and it's highly motivating, and it's very helpful to have the evidence because you can't walk away from it. Yeah, well, we'll be coming back to Jon for a more detailed look at the regional findings. But looking at this from the point of view of employers, I mean, there's clearly this overlap that we've been talking about between the sectors where poor numeracy is more prevalent and those which have felt the biggest impact of COVID over the past year. I mean, what is it that employers, whether they're either in the low numeracy or the higher numeracy industries, what can they do as employers to improve this position nationally? Claire, just to come back to you on this. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've been a founding supporter of National Numeracy Day and working with national numeracy for several years now because we see the importance of it. But we see the most important thing is collaboration. So this isn't about one organisation kind of putting its hands up. It's all of us saying that this is absolutely critical, and working with education providers, as I said, and government, central and local, to help with that. There's a real need to think about the focus of National Numeracy Day as a moment to say, actually, how can we motivate people to come forward and get greater confidence with numbers and to feel supported to do so. And employers have a massive role to play in that. This is not the role of the education system alone. This is about employers making people feel confident that they can ask for help to develop their numeracy skills, and we play a big role in that. One way that we can help, and I would suggest that lots of other organisations can help, is to have is to support volunteering associated with helping people with their numeracy. So just as an example, in 2020, around, actually more than 20% of our workforce who are granted volunteering days as part of our how we work together at KPMG have worked on a number of activities, including helping people to improve their numeracy. And our staff find it extraordinarily motivating. And of course, it is a very important offer to help people to develop their numeracy. So employers must play their part. If we want people to have numeracy in the workplace, we have to help to develop opportunities for people to develop numeracy, and to acknowledge that actually not everybody does that through the formal education system. So we must provide other routes to do it, which is why we work so closely with National Numeracy and their championing of that.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Sam, to come to you, I mean, am I right in thinking that very often it's difficult to get firms to acknowledge that they have a problem in their own workforce? And I know National Numeracy has done a fair amount of work with employers and has been more successful, I suppose, in some areas than others. But perhaps tell us about the areas where you have done well, and whether there's anything to be learnt from that about how we get through to employers who are a little shy, should we say, about admitting that there is an issue they've got to address.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the first things to really consider is the size of the numeracy issue. The size of the adult population with low numeracy skills is such that all large employers, in fact, most employers will have challenges in this area, and so it's a win-win for business, government, the communities, regional economies, for businesses to take this seriously, because it is an issue that absolutely will be, without doubt, affecting every single business. And it may not be apparent. That's one of the challenges, particularly when we start to think about attitudes towards numbers and numeracy and confidence, the interplay of these with skills, is that it's not necessarily something that's going to be on the surface and immediately identifiable. And to build on Claire's points about what businesses and employers can do, well, firstly, employers can make a commitment to addressing the issue. They can raise awareness of the issue and make it a priority in their businesses, to your point, Wendy. And they can work with National Numeracy in a variety of different ways to improve numeracy in the communities they serve, but of course also within their own workforces, supply chains and their client bases. And in the immediate term, they can take action on National Numeracy Day, which is, just for context, our annual celebration of numbers and the only national annual campaign dedicated to the role that numeracy plays throughout everyday life, which is more important than ever in the COVID recovery. And I'd also point, I think, to some of the really innovative work that is already being done by many employers. So, of course, KPMG are supporting the insight on the issue here today, and also are a founding supporter of National Numeracy Day. TPI-CAP are addressing barriers to access into the financial services around numeracy. And just to give those joining the call some inspiration, Experian, Santander, Amazon UK, PFG, Bloomberg LP, Health Education England and HSBC UK are all working in different and creative ways alongside National Numeracy to reach, engage, support and really to improve the numeracy of people across the country, particularly those with low number confidence and numeracy skills. So there's plenty of other organisations to look to for inspiration that are taking action in this issue.
Yeah, it's a growing list. And we also have worked with the idea of national numeracy champions, haven't we? People in the workforce. It really picks up on the point that Claire was making about employees being encouraged to do stuff. So people who are not necessarily brilliant mathematicians, but just have that basic confidence that they can pass on to their colleagues. I mean, that's important. As well as the difference between sectors, there was obviously coming out in Jon's report a regional story as well. So we're going to get a bit more detail on that now. So it's back over to Jon to tell us more of the regional findings.
Thank you. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. You'll be glad to hear. But I think we've already talked about some of those regional disparities. I think if you take the three regions that tend to come up with the lowest levels of numeracy skills in the UK, so that's the North East, the West Midlands, and Yorkshire and Humber. So on average across those three regions, there's around 64% of working age adults who have low numeracy skills, which is an incredibly high proportion. Now, if you look at the economies of those three sectors, the average wages for those three regions tend to be around 12% below the average for the UK. So that's the equivalent of around £3,400 per worker across those regions. So there's got a substantial gap in terms of the earning potential, the earning power of those economies in those regions. And that, to me, is exactly the kind of gap that the government should be talking about, should be thinking about when it's talking about levelling up. It's about supporting people to achieve a better quality of life, and part of that is through economic means, so through increased income. Now, whilst numeracy skills are not going to solve that entire gap on their own, and we wouldn't want to claim that they would, it does feel like they can be part of the solution. There is such kind of robust evidence that link numeracy skills to improved income for individuals that it feels like improving those numeracy skills for those regions that are currently performing the worst in the UK could help to contribute closing that gap, both for the sake of numeracy skills, but also for the sake of that kind of levelling up argument, increasing the quality of life for the individuals living there. And if you, again, link that evidence on the scale of the relationship between numeracy skills and wages and use that for those regions, it suggests that if you could, for the average person with low numeracy skills in those regions at the moment, it's likely to be costing them around £1,700 per year on average compared to individuals with basic numeracy skills. So, you know, whilst that's not going to solve the entire gap, £1,700 per person per year does start to feel like quite a substantial contributor that could help to kind of close those gaps between different regions. And when you think that there's 3.7 million workers across those three regions, those three worst performing regions with low numeracy skills, again, you can start to see how the scale of those improvements soon potentially add up. So that for me is the kind of key link through to those regional differences and how that could make a real material impact for the economies of those regions.
So if improving numeracy has got a key part to play in the whole levelling up agenda, how can we actually target what needs to be done? I mean, Claire, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. So addressing disadvantage through kind of geography is a key priority for us. As I said, because we have a national footprint as an organisation, we see it as part of our responsibility to make sure we're working across the UK, and so our volunteering commitment that I mentioned earlier on, we're seeking to extend to make sure that more than 30% of all our activity around volunteering is done in those areas which are in most need of support. So those areas which are appearing as most disadvantaged, whether they be educational cold spot areas or those where there are concerns about social mobility in particular sectors of the economy. So we know it will have got worse as a consequence of COVID, and so it's even more motivating to kind of step forward on it. I mean, just a couple of examples, if I may, just to give organisations that are joining the call a flavour of some of the things to do to help with this geographical kind of disadvantage and the need to work across the country. Our numeracy programmes with schools, for example, are specifically focused where we work with the Economist Educational Foundation, for example, on mobility, social mobility cold spot areas and opportunity areas. So the schools that we're working with are, and as a cornerstone employer, are in various parts of the country, so Norwich, Black Country, Fenland, Cambridgeshire, etc. And also with business in the community, working with Rochdale as a kind of the anchor lead in Rochdale, specifically working with other businesses in that area to come up with local solutions to help with essential skills. For me, this is one of the fundamental issues. We've got national data that says that there is a problem around numeracy. We can see cold spots of numeracy, as Jon described earlier on. The solutions may well need to be convened at a national level, but actually the application and the implementation needs to take shape with local businesses, local civic leaders designing and working together to make it work for that locality. And that's one of the things that we think we can help with, because we're across the country and because our workforce resides in the communities that we're trying to support, if you see what I mean. So we're not trying to do this from London on our headquarters in Canary Wharf. We're doing this nationally. And for us, that's kind of one of the key parts to making sure that levelling up or building back better, or whatever popular term we call it, we all care about it, and we're all prepared to make sure that this is, the evidence allows us to target those areas where we can most have an effect.
And Sam, for National Numeracy, we're a fairly small organisation with a physical base in the southeast. How can we target, looking at areas like the northeast, where there are particular problems?
Yeah, I think, well, at National Numeracy, we're starting to work towards a refreshed, ambitious strategy with social mobility at its heart going forward. And will remain open to everybody, but our focus will be on supporting those with the lowest numeracy in those communities and in those regions where the need is greatest, in order to help improve the skills and the confidence with numbers of those that need our support the most, and to support them to apply this towards improved outcomes in life, for example, towards work and careers. And I think the report itself provides a really, really good starting point around regional difference and insight. It gives us a really solid steer on where we should focus efforts, and we'll be paying a lot of attention to that. But, make no mistake, if we want a more equitable recovery and vibrant, resilient, highly competitive local and regional economies, investing in basic skills at the local level, particularly those where there's low numeracy, is absolutely essential. So we'll be focused and continuing even more so to work where the need is greatest, and to develop further insight to look at specifically where the need is greatest within those regions, what specifically we can do to support people to take that first step. And that's where our focus will be going forward in the future.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to take some questions now. They are coming in, but please continue to put them in. The first one actually is from Tina at TPICAP, who Sam mentioned a little earlier as one of our leading supporters. And her question is very much about confidence. She says, confidence with numbers, or the lack of it, is a barrier to work prospects, at least as much as numeracy skills. So we're getting the distinction between skills and confidence. And she asks, how can we forge a solution that develops confidence with numbers as well as skills? That does sound like one for you, Sam.
I think it's really important to look at the interplay between those two things, and it's a crucial point. And I think that confidence is absolutely the missing link here. To support people with low numeracy, any skill solution must be prefaced, and it must always be accompanied by action to build number confidence, and it also must be tailored specifically for adults. And I mean, the report highlights these potential gains for up to 16 million workers, and there is lots and lots of fantastic provision out there already, and a lot being done to increase that provision and make it more accessible for this group with low numeracy. And it's, for example, it's most often, and even more so now, free of charge. But we do wonder year on year why those with the lowest skills struggle to engage. And I don't mean to oversimplify it. This is a complex picture, but our experience working with tens of thousands of people is that for very understandable reasons, such as, for example, the experience you may have had at school, many people have closed the door to maths and to numeracy, and really struggle to open it back up again. For many, it's the confidence with numbers or anxiety towards maths rather than the skills. That's the initial and most entrenched barrier. So at National Numeracy, we've developed the National Numeracy Challenge, which is a self-contained learning tool that's already supported many thousands of people to improve their numeracy, and it builds confidence. It doesn't feel like school. It is tailored for adults, and it's incredibly cost-effective way for those investing in national numeracy to help adults with low numeracy take their first step. And it's absolutely, that's where confidence comes in as a stepping stone. In order for people to start their journey to improve skills, they've got to take that first step, and really we see confidence at the centre of that.
Okay, there's a question here which is perhaps for Jon, a very straightforward question from Linda Cummings. What are the figures like for Scotland? Now, as I recall, Scotland didn't take part in the OECD survey, other results have shown that it does marginally better than England, but not really anything to write home about. Is that fair?
That's about right, I think. So it's a very simple question with not a very straightforward answer, I'm afraid. That essentially Wales and Scotland didn't participate in the OECD study, which, as I say, is the kind of most comprehensive measure that was that's been completed in the UK over the last 10 years. Wales has completed its own surveys around 10 years ago, which suggests that they are broadly similar in level to England in terms of levels of numeracy skills. Scotland, as far as I'm aware, has never completed a really kind of comprehensive study of its own basic numeracy skills. So we don't have a lot of data there, but what we do have, which is from some of the surveys that National Numeracy have run, does suggest that it does marginally better than England, but a similar kind of ballpark, I think. I don't think we'd be talking about Scotland being compared to Japan and Netherlands. I think it's more just marginally better than England.
So we're right to see this as a UK-wide problem?
All the evidence points that way.
Yeah. Okay, next question, I think falls into two parts, from Lewis Rogers, who asks, do companies realise they're hiring people with high levels of numeracy or low levels, and do they test people? And because if not, he says, surely they do need to recognise the importance of this. But following on from this, second part of the question, is there a recognised numeracy certificate that people can work towards and include on a CV? So the first part of that, do companies know people's numeracy abilities or skills when they're hiring? And Claire?
I think it's variable, and I think it's very heavily qualifications reliant, which I think is part of our problem. So we all know that there are challenges with people progressing to achieve GCSE maths, and if that's the benchmark of us assessing people's numeracy skills, then we know that we're probably already excluding people from applying for roles or from when they're seeking to have roles to achieving them. That's a general point for employers across the UK. So there's something about acknowledging that numeracy skills can be demonstrated in ways other than by attaining a GCSE, and on another day we might revisit the approach to GCSE qualification itself, because it naturally excludes people from being able to demonstrate their numeracy. I think there's a lack of understanding around numeracy, because one assumes that GCSE maths means that you're numerate for work, and we know that that's probably not the case, and so people have varying degrees of comfort and confidence, to go back to a point raised by one of the inquirers earlier on, with using numbers at work. So I think there's something about getting to schools earlier and making numbers fun. There's something about making people understand that even if they think maths isn't for them because of their experience with GCSE maths and at school, that actually basic numeracy work can be enjoyable. So, for example, we did a session in November that we wouldn't have run without there being a pandemic, where we brought 10 schools together to work with the Economist Educational Foundation on numeracy. We got schools, pupils from different schools talking to each other and working with leaders, volunteers and senior leaders from within KPMG to understand how we use numbers at work and why they're important. So it's getting people not just to sort of find them fun, but actually to see their importance in the workplace, and to see that there is absolutely a need for us to think about helping people if they haven't achieved GCSE maths, but even if they have, to be able to develop numeracy skills for the workplace, which many people don't have at the moment, and this evidence reinforces that.
And Sam, the suggestion of a numeracy certificate, which, as Claire's suggesting, might be quite different from a GCSE, this is perhaps relevant for what we offer with the work around the National Numeracy Challenge?
Yes, indeed. I'd agree, all of the points Claire's made, I think, are really, really, really important points there. We know that there is a disconnect. I mean, these figures in this report demonstrate really clearly that there's a disconnect between children emerging or adults emerging from their education with, for example, a GCSE and their level of numeracy, how they're able to apply that in their lives to get on in all aspects. And so absolutely, I think we have to have another look and a deeper look at that. Not least because also I think we're missing out on huge opportunity here, because if we are able, particularly when we look at those with lowest numeracy, to make a difference, to get those people confident and learning, the gains are significant. And absolutely, as you say, with the National Numeracy Challenge, we have something called the Essentials of Numeracy, which is essentially a really accessible way to start to develop the numeracy that you will need in everyday life, right up to a sort of a level two, which is really going to support people in work to be able to use numbers to make good decisions. And I think also the other thing to highlight is the role of functional skills, a really, really important role of functional skills, particularly as it links to things like apprenticeships, and so particularly for those with low number confidence and low numeracy. It plays a really important role. I think where we could really improve that, working with government and businesses, is to get people really to take that first step. That's what's so important. And beyond that, that will really link into the functional skills, which is a really important qualification and a good bar for people in terms of getting into and on at work.
So it's not an either or, it's they complement each other, and
Absolutely.
as you suggested, the challenge can be the first step.
Absolutely.
For many people, which may lead on to functional skills or GCSE or whatever. A question here, a very broad question from Corinne Harms. If the UK can crack this, and build back better with a higher skilled economy, what sorts of benefits can we expect and over what period? Now, this is real crystal ball gazing, but Claire, any thoughts?
So, yes, very much so. I'm struck by the data that Jon described in terms of the impact on income from having lower numeracy levels, and we know that in-work poverty and lower incomes have a significant effect on people's opportunities to progress, to participate in all aspects of the UK society and so on. And so for me, there's all the evidence points to, if you give people the chance to have basic skills and to be able to engage in social mobility for whatever our backgrounds are, that you give people the chance to be productive in life, for their children to have a chance of good education, for their health outcomes to be greater, and for their life expectancy to be the average rather than significantly longer than the average. And I'm no economist, but all of those things join up in the end. And if we don't address aspects which are excluding people from the economy and preventing them from earning a decent living, we are making problems not just for their own well-being and their happiness, but for society at large.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think we've got time just for one very quick final question, which is from Tessa McKenzie, who asks, what about numeracy provision in the workplace? And also, leading on from that, how do we address the risk that with increased unemployment, employers will be able to pick from a large pool of people and will sift on higher numeracy skills? I mean, two questions there, but numeracy provision in the workplace. Sam, do you have any kind of experience of what actually is happening in the workplace?
I think that some areas where we've seen really significant shifts, for example, might be a good example would be National Numeracy's work with the NHS. A really good example where you can see how, particularly tying in improvement in basic skills, particularly numeracy as a barrier around competence and skills to progression, for example, but very much particularly in terms of the care certificate and progression to apprenticeships. There's some incredible work working in partnership with NHS trusts across the country to be able to look at in-work development of numeracy, particularly through the use of numeracy champions, those that would be able to champion the importance of numeracy and support others in their own workforce to develop numeracy confidence and skills. I think it's a fantastic model that should be extended far more extensively across lots of different employers, and there's many unions are doing great work in this space with National Numeracy as well. There's an easy way in here as well with the National Numeracy Challenge. There's a way for employers to engage on a very low-cost way in terms of being able to develop their workforces. And of course, I think really picking up on that point around functional skills, there's a great sense of progression here that really, I think employers, businesses need to get behind the role that they can play, their stepping stones. And particularly, I emphasize these 2 points because where we are not, where we really need to invest more is looking at those with, as the report attests, is those with the lowest levels of numeracy, where that's where really we could make a really substantial difference.
And finally, Claire, I mean, will employers be sifting more if, with unemployment rising, they're going to have a bigger pool? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think employers need to think, all employers need to think about the skills that they need, not necessarily just the sort of qualifications that people present with. I think we've all evolved significantly on that. I think it's wonderful to have a bigger talent pool to be not sifting, because I think we don't do that, but I think in terms of kind of thinking about how people can best progress in organisations like the one I work for, but many other organisations as well. I think fundamentally, we want there to be more people available to work and to work in a wider range of roles. And consequently, if we know that numeracy is presenting a barrier to many millions of people being able to progress into the careers and the roles that they would like to do, we need to play our part in unlocking that. So I think all employers will have to think not just about what skills people present when they turn up in their organisation, but what skills they'll need to develop as they move through the organisation. Lots of people are talking about digital skills at the moment. Today's session is focused on the fact that basic numeracy is lacking, and we mustn't assume that people are numerate. We must assume that we need to help people with a whole range of essential skills as they progress and work for us and other organisations. I mean, it sounds very negative, some of this data, but actually it's a massive opportunity for us to collaborate and help people to work well and live well.
I said finally, but finally, can we sort of look briefly, very briefly, I'm going to ask you to do this in about 20 seconds, look ahead. So what does the future, the immediate future, rather than the very long term, hold for tackling low numeracy? Sam?
For 20 seconds. Well, look, millions of people struggle with numbers. With the right support, everyone can improve. And we know from the report that this will benefit everybody in the country. So as we rebuild a workforce, this must play a central role. And there's huge opportunity there. So I would say, first and foremost, join us in addressing the issue. And in the first instance, National Numeracy Day is a great opportunity to work with National Numeracy, our lead supporters, delivery partners, and over 1,500 champion organisations to help inspire thousands of people to improve their numeracy. So please do get in touch and work with us.
Okay, it gets better year by year. And Claire, for you, the immediate...
wholeheartedly support the call to action around National Numeracy Day. It's a wonderful opportunity to draw attention to this issue, but then obviously to take action. For our part, we will be playing our part alongside thousands of organisations that are now involved. And if your organisation isn't involved, please do think about it. For our part, a very significant shift forward in our volunteering focus on mentoring people who are unemployed, on mentoring young people who want to get into the workforce, and on providing numeracy support in the communities that we serve as an organisation across the UK.
Okay, thank you, Claire. And thank you to all the panel, to Claire Warne, Sam Sims and Jon Franklin. And on behalf of National Numeracy, I'd like to thank PBE again for producing the report and KPMG for making it happen. And thank you to all of you who've attended. Sorry, I just couldn't see you, but we got in some of your questions at least. A reminder that the report will be coming out, will be published just after Easter. We don't have the exact day yet, but you'll get your copy. And just to pick up on Sam's point and Claire's point, a reminder of National Numeracy Day. It's Wednesday, the 19th of May. If you're not already involved, please get in touch with National Numeracy to see what you or your organisation can do or how you can benefit from the day. And that just about brings us to the end, but we're going to go out with a bit of pizzazz. We've got a short film which was made to celebrate National Numeracy Day last year. It's only 3 minutes long, so please do stay on and watch it. And and thank you very much.
National Numeracy, together with our supporters and National Numeracy Day heroes, are hosting a day of online events to help with 3 areas of numeracy. KPMG is proud to be the founding business supporter of National Numeracy Day. We started working with National Numeracy in 2018 to change the conversation around numeracy and to help improve the awareness of the importance of numeracy in our everyday lives.
Being confident with numbers can really help us get ahead in life.
Maths is everywhere. Everything we do, we are using maths, even if we don't notice we're using it. So it's important to have a confidence in it and a confidence in basic number work.
And that's what I think National Numeracy Day is so important, because it addresses all of those aspects.
Be positive, be so positive, even when you're finding something difficult.
Challenge yourself to something that can change your future.
That's why I'm proud to be an ambassador for National Numeracy Day, and I urge you to take the National Numeracy Challenge.
Santander UK is proud to support National Numeracy Day in 2021. We recognize the importance of numbers and how they can help improve financial skills. And together with National Numeracy, we are working to improve number confidence in the UK.
At Experian, we help lenders remove the guesswork from credit and consumers to take control of their personal finances. Given the strong links between numeracy and financial capability, it's vital we help British adults develop their number skills. Through our National Numeracy Day campaign, we help inspire thousands of consumers to improve their numeracy and, as a result, their financial future.
National Numeracy empowers people to get on with numbers so that they can get on in life. This year, National Numeracy Day will help the nation recover at home, work and at school. Please join us and a committed group of pioneering businesses to make a real difference to people's lives.